Rage quit.
Talking about, boys, finally! Oh! Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Again, to bring you Mythic Mythrax's healing guide, everything you need to know about taking this boss down from a healer's point of view, and how we did it in future, right? At the start of this fight, as you see when we drop down, we do have 5 points spread out around the boss in the shape of a pentagon. These 5 different points are where we put all of our healers. And we did as best as we could to make sure we're trying to keep everybody pretty relatively spread out over the course of this fight, because the Oblivion Spheres, like you do see on Heroic, deal a substantial amount of damage. Important things to note on this fight is going to be vision and distance to everybody else on the encounter. Who you're going to be in range of to be able to heal, when you have to be able to step in and step forward to ramp, especially as a Discipline Priest, or just to be able to put out any other kind of general heals onto the rest of the group here. Always is extremely important to keep in mind as we go through this encounter. You'll see very early on in the fight, we do make sure that we're moving in before the Mythic Mechanic, which is Zalzai, which is the living weapon that gets thrown down by the boss. It will have 2 main real casts. It will just have the frontal that you usually see from the boss. So recently they have buffed it so it's actually very easy to see. It's kind of like a flashlight that effect that comes in front of them. Previously you would have to just kind of look around and see where that front purple panel was that would represent Zalzai's face and to know which direction it was pointing at, which made things very difficult if it was on the opposite side of the room there. So ideal things to know about this fight is that the first phase, and then you have 1 phase and you go into a transition, and then after that point all of the mechanics stay the same here. So what you see in this first phase you will continue to see after the first transition, and then that second transition is going to go in the exact same way. So as a healer core, you are able to actually plan out your raid cooldowns in a very consistent fashion, and once you get into a cycle of when each person's using their cooldowns, you'll basically start using them almost exactly when they come back off cooldown, right? Discipline especially has very well set in stone areas of where it's great to be able to ramp up. What I did personally is I ramped up very early on for the first ad during the regular phase, and then I was able to get a second evangelism out just as the second ad went away, and I was able to deal with some of the lingering damage from that ad. All right. The ad, of course, you have to watch out for the Void Echoes cast as well as that Obliteration Blast frontal like we talked about, and it's very important to be able to add any kind of damage that you can to be able to help get it down quickly before the third Void Echoes cast gets off. The first 2 are expected and you'll be able to heal through them, rotating through cooldowns. Like I said, Discipline's ramp should be generally put in that area. But then after that point, if you get a third Echoes, it's very likely that you will be dying, and very likely you will lose people. Going into this transition phase, we found 2 spots that we would ping pong to. As you're seeing on this skull marker here, it's actually a rock that you get to jump onto, and it can be kind of annoying to jump onto, but once you actually have everybody stacked onto that rock, it will group up all of the Visions of Madness onto that exact location, allowing the group to more easily cleave it all down. Big thing to note with these ads is you can, of course, interrupt them. You have the regular kicks, but you can also dispel. So if you have like a Shadow Priest, for example, you can get the Mass Dispel. Your Holy or Discipline Priest can take advantage of this if they have mana to spare to be able to get the Mass Dispel right before the beam goes off, so nobody will be slowed, but it is pretty mana intensive, so keep that in mind if it's going to be the right move for the group. Otherwise, if you personally are getting slowed, you can easily just self-dispel to be able to deal with it. I personally do not use Evangelism during this intermission period at all. Instead, I make sure I have Rapture available for the first sets of ads, and then just Rapture all of the ranged DPS that are killing any of those Visions of Madness, because they usually will end up mind flaying those targets, right? And you can always go into logs and start seeing, okay, which ads are most consistently targeting which players, right? You'll be able to see the Vision of Madness are often going towards ranged DPS, so that those will be your targets that you want to make sure that you're healing. Now when you end, the big areas for cooldowns are generally going to be as you're finishing up the phase and moving on to the transition, and when you're coming out of a transition, that's also a pressure point that you need to be able to pick up back on. And specifically because in my role as Discipline, I'm ramping up for that first ad, there's a very open area where it's a very big exposed area, you could say, where we needed to have a cooldown consistently getting out of that phase. So often we made sure that we would have, for example, a Tranquility or Divine Hymn to kind of get us out of that phase and get us back into our regular positions. That way we would be able to keep everybody topped off and then start, like I said, going back into that cycle where just as people's raid cooldowns are coming off cooldown, they're able to push them again, and we're constantly having a cycle through our cooldowns as rapidly really as we possibly can. So going back into this phase, as you're noticing, we are having our monks, our brewmasters, cycling through their Ring of Pieces to break people out of the Oblivion Spheres. We chose to have very specific people cycling through their abilities to break people out as quickly as they can. So we use Ring of Peace and we use Death Knight Grip to break people out. We tried it with Hunters and they spent so much activity time trying to break people out with Barrage that it didn't really seem like it was going to be worth it at all. So instead, we just went through Ring of Pieces. It was a global or two from each player to be able to break them out quickly, efficiently, and it's extremely important to be watching your range radars here to make sure that you're not getting a double stack. Big things that will be killing you on this fight is getting 2 players in an Oblivion Sphere and breaking them out at the same time. And you also have to watch out for how those line up with the Imminent Ruin. You can even see here, Undy will get Oblivion Sphere to be the target of Oblivion Sphere, and just after she is broken out, then you have an Imminent Ruin detonating into the group, right? There's a huge amount of damage going on here, and you have to be able to continuously be cycling through cooldowns to save healer mana, because you have very limited windows with where you're able to drink safely and not risk getting targeted by specific mechanics, targeted by maybe one of the Obliteration Blasts, or be in the position of be in range of any of the beams or anything like that. One of the best areas that you'll be able to drink is definitely going to be in the intermission phase. When we went from the blue marker to the skull, if everybody's in a safe enough position, at this point people really were not for me to be able to do it, but other healers were able to take advantage of it before. That was usually going to be the area where you get there immediately, get on top of the rock, and then start drinking as your other healers start topping people off. It's a great area to do because the damage is not even going to arrive until the ads actually impact. So it's the responsibility of everybody, all the healers, to get everybody slowly topped off. But if you're able to have one or two of them, one or two healers drink during that period, it goes a very long way into having more mana as you get to the end of the fight here. As you're seeing, I got a little bit of a window to be able to deal with, to get my drink in, and I quickly got back up to be able to start healing just as that beam went out, although I did get clipped by the beam a little bit. And it's not too bad if you get clipped, but you do have to keep in mind in the last phase, there's not going to be any orbs for you to pick up, so you can't take too many risks as you are going to be going back into your group to go and finish off the boss, because your HP can be reduced by such a substantial margin if you're not picking up orbs right as the intermission begins, if you're not picking up your orbs from Imminent Ruins consistently. All those things really add up, and at the end of the fight, they can just utterly kill you and utterly obliterate you as you're just trying to survive. We'll see even here, going into that last phase, we have multiple people with 10 to 20 stacks. Some people even had 30 stacks, so they're getting hit by really big mechanics they shouldn't be. So all of those things start compounding, and it can easily turn what is usually a manageable mechanic into just a straight one-shot if you're not careful. And mistakes early on in the fight will continue to kind of haunt you later on into it. Once you get to this 20% mark, like I mentioned, there's not going to be any more orbs that are going to be spawning from things like Imminent Ruin or from the Essence Shear coming in onto the tanks here. So it's very important to make sure battle reses are available, and just about every tank external under the sun available to dump onto tanks when need be. They especially will have the lowest amount of HP, so even when we'll look that they're at 80% HP before an Essence Shear, they might just need to be topped off completely to be able to survive it, depending on how many stacks are going out onto the group here. But from there, like I mentioned before, at that point, as you're seeing here, I drop Barrier, I drop Pain Suppression onto the tank, I drop anything I can to make sure that they're able to survive and able to stabilize themselves just before an Essence Shear. But sometimes, even as you see there, it's not quite enough because of how many stacks go out there. So we're looking, for example, at our battle res timer to be able to get another res out very quickly to help burn the boss, because it's so easy to start losing out onto the tanks there. You're seeing Hand of Sacrifice and Guardian Spirit going onto the tank there on Fem just to try to make sure they stabilize him, keep him alive, and as much spam healing going into them and making sure that's their priority target. We even delayed, for example, breaking people out of Oblivion Spheres at the very end, because it was more worthwhile for us to reduce the damage onto the entire group and just completely burn the boss and focus it down as best as we possibly could here. This fight can take quite a while to make sure everyone's getting the mechanics down, but it is extremely rewarding when everyone's able to perform and basically do their jobs there. Really great kill for Mythrax, and it's overall a very fun fight to heal with. Just important to keep in mind how the phases are going to be going, the rotation that you're going to be going through there, and constantly cycling through those raid cooldowns to be able to save your mana for that last phase when it's just going to be a straight burn, and even having to play more inefficiently to just completely spam the tanks so that they're topped off at as much health as they could possibly have to be able to survive the Essence Shears at the very end of the encounter. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you all found this Mythic Mythrax video useful. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, or be sure to check out the live stream linked down there as well. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll catch y'all next time.